She had always thought that love could heal anything, that it could bridge any distance, mend any wound. But as Lauren stood over the grave of her sister, the only thing that filled her was a crushing emptiness, as if the world itself had turned cold. "I should have been there for you," she thought, her fingers trembling as they brushed the cold stone. If I had only known, if I had only understood, but there was no time for what-ifs. The darkness was coming and the door was opening again, and this time it wasn't just Emily she had to save. The night was far colder than it had any right to be, even for late October in northern Maine. The wind blew through the trees in long, mournful gusts, and the moon hung high like a silent observer, casting a sickly light on the frozen ground below. The road was long and empty, save for the occasional flicker of an old streetlight in the distance, each one seeming to stretch the shadows into grotesque shapes that seemed to claw at the car. Lauren Bishop gripped the wheel of her old sedan tighter as she navigated the winding road. Her eyes darted nervously between the rearview mirror and the dark forest that bordered the highway. It had been hours since she'd last passed through a town, and the isolation of this part of Maine was beginning to feel oppressive. But that wasn't what unnerved her. It was the radio. It had started about 30 minutes ago, an odd static hum that crept into the frequencies of her car's old radio. At first she assumed it was just a malfunction, something to expect from a car with over 150,000 miles on it. But when she tried to switch to another station, she realized something odd. The static was consistent. And then, through the thick buzz of interference, a voice had started, soft male calm. "You're getting closer, Lauren." Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't said her name aloud, not to the radio, not to anyone, and yet this voice knew her. She had chalked it up to coincidence at first. Something explainable, just a prank maybe, or an eerie echo bouncing off the hills. But when it came back a second time, clearer this time, like the speaker was inside her mind rather than on the radio, she began to feel the prickling sensation of dread. "Don't be afraid. We've been waiting." The voice had no texture, no warmth. It was as if the words were spoken through a hollow echo, like it was speaking from the depths of a well cold and endless. Every muscle in her body tensed, her knuckles whitening on the steering wheel as she pressed the button to turn off the radio. Nothing happened. The voice continued, unrelenting, like a dark whisper she couldn't escape. "You're so close now, Lauren. Don't you want to know what's waiting for you?" Lauren's breath quickened. She could feel the hairs on her arms stand up as the silence of the night outside her car deepened. She tried to pull over to the side of the road, her heart hammering in her chest as she fought to make sense of what was happening. Why was she hearing this? Why her? Her sister Emily had gone missing in these woods a decade ago, and no one had ever found any answers. Local authorities had assumed it was some kind of hiking accident, or that she'd run away. But Lauren never believed that. The timing of this strange occurrence, the voice, the static, felt too familiar, too connected to the mysterious events surrounding her sister's disappearance. She had to know what had happened, even if it meant stepping into the very nightmare she had spent years trying to outrun. And then, the static seemed to clear, replaced by a song. It was "You Are My Sunshine," but it was distorted, warped into something haunting, a distant, eerie melody that scraped against the walls of her mind like a broken music box. Her eyes widened in recognition. That was the song Emily had always sung when she was younger, when they used to play hide and seek in the backyard during the summers. The tune had become a distant memory, buried with all the other pieces of their childhood that she'd never been able to reconcile. The song brought back everything: her sister's laughter, her infectious joy, the warmth of those rare, fleeting moments before everything turned cold and broken. But now, this song felt wrong, twisted, "She's here, Lauren. She's waiting for you." The words weren't a voice anymore. They were thoughts, invasive and sharp, stabbing through her mind with terrifying clarity. Her pulse raced as she jerked the wheel to the side, her headlights flashing over an old overgrown road sign that read WZRP 103.6 FM. She slammed on the brakes, her tires skidding on the icy road before finally coming to a halt. The sign was weathered, rusted, and all but forgotten by time. She remembered hearing about WZRP, the radio station that had shut down in 1987, when strange things started happening in the small town of Red Hollow. Whispers about a cursed broadcast, rumors of lost souls, and strange transmissions that echoed across the airwaves at night. But Lauren hadn't thought much of it until now. Now, the memories and stories felt like ghosts, reaching out from the past to tug at her mind. The station was here. She could see it through the trees just ahead in the darkness. The building seemed abandoned, but the lights were on. There was a faint, sickly glow emanating from the windows, and the eerie hum of static still filled the air. The voice on the radio spoke again. "You've come so far. Come inside, Lauren." The invitation was as warm as a knife to the throat. But Lauren had come too far to turn back now. She couldn't. This was the only place that might give her the answers she needed. The only place that might bring her closer to finding her sister. Her hands shook as she stepped out of the car, her breath visible in the cold air. The sound of the song, "You Are My Sunshine," still played in the background, though faint now, as if coming from the depths of the building itself. She crossed the snow-covered ground, her boots crunching in the silence. When she reached the door of the station, she hesitated. There were no sounds, no voices. Just the hum of static still vibrating through the walls. The door creaked open of its own accord. The moment she stepped inside, the lights flickered once, and then stabilized. The smell of dust and decay filled the air. The walls, lined with old records and tapes, seemed to stare back at her, silent witnesses to the passage of time. A single red light glowed above a microphone at the far end of the room. And then, from somewhere deeper inside the station, she heard it. The sound of someone humming. It was the same song, "You Are My Sunshine." Lauren's heart pounded as she stepped forward, the door to the broadcast studio opening with a slow, deliberate creak. And there, sitting at the console with headphones on, was a man. He didn't look like a ghost, at least not in the traditional sense. But something about him was wrong. His face was pale, gaunt, and there was a dark circle around his eyes like he hadn't slept in years. He didn't look up when she entered. His hands were busy adjusting the controls, the static now filling the room in an unsettling hum. "We've been waiting for you, Lauren." The man at the radio console didn't turn to face her. His fingers hovered over the dials, adjusting the knobs with methodical precision. The static buzzed louder, swirling in the air like a living thing, as if the entire room was wrapped in some invisible storm. Lauren stepped into the broadcast studio, her heart thudding in her chest. The floor beneath her feet creaked, the only sound other than the eerie hum of the radio and her own shaky breath. The lights above flickered again, casting long shadows across the room. She couldn't tear her eyes away from him. The man was wearing an old, worn-out plaid shirt, the kind that might have been in style back in the 80s, but he seemed untouched by time. His movements were slow, deliberate, too slow, as if he wasn't quite in control of his body. His lips were pressed tight together, but she could see the faintest tremor in his hands. "It's been a long time, hasn't it, Lauren?" The voice didn't come from his mouth. It was like the words were spoken directly into her mind, clear and cold, as if they were a thought she couldn't escape. Her pulse spiked. She wanted to turn and run, to flee the room and never look back. but her body refused to obey, her feet rooted to the ground like she was trapped in a nightmare. She'd felt this before, the sensation of something being off, something wrong, about this place, about him. She finally found her voice, though it was a hoarse whisper. Who are you? Her throat felt dry, constricted. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly turned his head toward her, his eyes dark and hollow, the pupils dilated to an unnatural size. His skin was so pale, it almost glowed in the dim light. His face was gaunt, sunken, like something that had been dead for years, and yet, it was somehow still alive. Oh, Lauren, you already knows who I am. His voice wrapped around her like an invisible chain. I've been here for so long, I can't even remember my real name anymore. But I've become something else now. Something that will always exist in the night, where the air is thick with secrets and shadows. Lauren felt a shiver crawl up her spine. This wasn't a man in front of her. It couldn't be. This was something else entirely. You can call me the night host. The words seemed to echo in the room, bouncing off the walls like they were alive. The host, finally rose from his seat, slowly, stiffly, his gaze never leaving hers. He stepped toward the console, the song still playing softly in the background. You are my sunshine. But now it sounded even more distorted, stretched, twisted in a way that made her stomach churn. Lauren couldn't look away. His presence was magnetic, pulling her in despite every instinct screaming for her to run. She took an involuntary step forward. You're here because of her, aren't you? The night host said, his voice low and rasping. Because of Emily. The mention of her sister's name sent a shock through her chest. She had never told anyone, no one outside of her family at least, that she was looking for Emily. The police had long since stopped investigating. The case had gone cold. No one cared anymore. Yet here it was again. This name, this haunting reminder of the past. The man's lips twisted into a smile, a wide, unsettling grin that stretched too far across his face. I can feel it in your heart. The weight of her memory. He stepped closer, his breath cold against her skin. You came because you want to know the truth. But there's more than just truth here. There are consequences. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted to the radio console. The old-fashioned dials, the scratched and weathered buttons all seemed to pulse with energy of their own. The light above the microphone flickered again, casting fleeting shadows across his face, making it even harder to look at him. The longer she stared, the more she felt like she was falling into something, into a trap she couldn't escape. You see, Lauren, WZRP didn't shut down in 1987, not really. The night host's voice was a low whisper now, dripping with malice. The station is timeless. It's a place where lost things go to be kept. And once you step inside, you're never really free again. The room seemed to grow colder, the walls pressing in around her. She fought the urge to scream, to tear her away from the madness that was enveloping her. This wasn't right. None of this was real. But the more she tried to rationalize it, the more it felt like she was sinking deeper into a nightmare. You should have stayed away, Lauren. The night host continued, his grin widening. But now that you're here, you've become part of the broadcast, part of the story. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she caught herself against the console, barely holding on to consciousness. The static around her seemed to swell louder and louder until it felt like it was inside her skull. The hum of the radio filled her ears, and for a moment she felt herself being pulled toward the mic. She didn't know why, but she wanted to speak, wanted to say something into it. No, she gasped, her voice breaking. I didn't come here for this. I came to find Emily. The night host laughed. It was a hollow, mirthless sound, full of something far darker than she had ever heard before. "Oh, you'll find her." He took a step back, his figure blending into the shadows. For a moment, it seemed like he was dissolving into the air itself. "But first you must understand." And then the song began again. "You are my sunshine." But now the words were warped, twisted. It wasn't the same song anymore. It was broken. The voice on the radio was her voice. Emily's voice. Lauren's. Heart slammed against her ribs as she heard Emily's voice. Her eyes darted toward the radio, the sound now warbling and fractured. The once familiar melody of "You Are My Sunshine" had become something unrecognizable, like a fractured lullaby, distorted and heavy, as if it were dragging its own weight through the air. Her mind raced, desperately trying to piece together what was happening. That's not possible, she thought. Emily's been gone for 10 years. Yet the voice, it wasn't just the song. It was her sister's voice. A faint, ethereal echo, as if the past had reached forward, clutching at her soul. Lauren could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, her vision beginning to blur as she stumbled toward the radio console, as if some invisible force were pushing her closer. "Emily?" she whispered, barely daring to breathe the name, half expecting it to vanish into the air like a fleeting dream. The night host watched her, his eyes now glimmering like deep pits, almost alive in the darkness. His smile widened, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, but it was there, waiting. "You heard her, didn't you?" The night host's voice slithered through the static. "She's waiting for you, Lauren. She's always been waiting. Right here, in this place. You know that, don't you?" Lauren's throat tightened. She tried to speak, but her voice seemed to be trapped inside her chest. "What is this place?" she thought as her eyes wandered frantically around the room. Everything felt wrong. The room was too still, too silent, as if the air itself were holding its breath. She turned toward the walls, gray, peeling paint, the radio equipment in disrepair. But there was something else she hadn't noticed before, a mirror. It stood to the left of the console, its surface framed by dark, chipped wood. It was tall, imposing. She hadn't seen it when she first entered, but now it seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as if it were a doorway into some other world. It reflected not just the studio, but the very shadows in the corners of the room. Shadows that shifted as though alive, crawling in and out of the reflection. Emily, the name broke free from her lips, but it was barely a whisper, as if saying it too loudly would make it vanish. The night host didn't move, only watching her with that unreadable smile. His gaze seemed to lock onto the mirror, as though waiting for something to happen. "Go on," he coaxed. "She's waiting in there. You can see her. All you have to do is look." Lauren's legs shook as she took a hesitant step toward the mirror. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her feet betrayed her, taking one slow step after another, moving her closer to the dark surface. She didn't want to look. She didn't want to see what was waiting on the other side. But something in her compelled her forward. The reflection in the mirror began to shift, the shadows growing darker, thicker. She could see herself, her own pale face, staring back at her, wide-eyed and breathless, but something was wrong. The figure in the reflection wasn't moving in sync with her. It was smiling. Her own reflection tilted its head, a mockery of the movements she made, as though it were playing with her. The smile on the reflection's face stretched unnaturally wide, its eyes glowing with a cold, empty light. Lauren gasped, stumbling backward. This wasn't her. This wasn't right. But then, just as quickly as the smile appeared, it was gone. In the reflection, she saw a figure behind her, a shadowy shape standing just out of the corner of her vision. Her breath caught in her throat. She spun around, her heart racing, but there was nothing there. Just empty space, the cold, musty air of the abandoned radio station. You see it now, don't you? The night host's voice dripped with amusement. The mirror doesn't just reflect what's in front of it, it reflects what's inside, what's buried deep within you. Lauren's pulse quickened. Her reflection in the mirror grinned back at her again. It wasn't her smile. It was darker, twisted, a version of herself she didn't recognize. Something in her mind snapped. Her vision wavered. "Get out," she shouted, stumbling back, her feet scraping against the floor. But the mirror didn't release her gaze. In fact, the reflection seemed to pull her in, drawing her closer as if it were alive, reaching through the glass, bending reality itself. The air grew colder, and the shadows began to take on shapes. Elongated figures with sharp skeletal limbs that twitched as if they were waiting for her. Her breath caught in her throat, the world spinning. She felt like she was being torn apart. "She's not really gone, Lauren," the night host said softly, almost tenderly. "She's here, in the mirror, in the station. We keep her, just like we keep everything. The past, the lost, the forgotten. They never truly leave." The words cut into her like ice. She turned to face him, her body trembling as she tried to pull herself away from the mirror. But it wasn't her own will that moved her now. Her legs moved of their own accord, dragging her toward the glass, her reflection now beckoning her, like a siren in the dark. "If you want to find her." The night host's voice was almost gentle now, coaxing, soothing, like an old friend telling a secret. "You need to come closer, let go. Let the past in, embrace it, and you'll find Emily, waiting for you, just like she always has." The reflection in the mirror began to change, the shadowy figure becoming clearer. It was her sister, Emily. But this Emily was wrong. Her face was twisted, pale, frozen in an expression of pure terror, her eyes wide and empty, as though trapped in the glass, reaching out toward Lauren. She screamed silently, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. The reflection reached toward Lauren with long, dark fingers, the shadows clawing at the surface, desperate to drag her in. "Come to her, Lauren. She's waiting." Lauren's heartbeat pounded in her ears as she struggled to break free of the mirror's grasp. The reflection of Emily, no, that wasn't her, was still there, clawing at the glass. Her sister's face, twisted and contorted with an expression of pure, unrelenting fear, filled the mirror, her mouth wide in a silent scream. The eyes that once held warmth were now hollow and empty, staring through Lauren with an intensity that sent a cold shiver through her body. She could feel the mirror pulling at her, tugging her like a drowning swimmer fighting against the tide. Her feet shuffled backward, her body moving involuntarily. The shadows that had once seemed to move of their own accord now crept toward her, slithering across the walls, inching closer with every second. The night host's voice, cold and hypnotic, echoed in her mind. "She's here, Lauren. She's always been here, waiting." Lauren tried to wrench herself away from the mirror's pull, but it was no use. Her reflection smiled again, a twisted, cruel grin that made her stomach churn. It wasn't her anymore. The reflection in the glass was someone else, something else entirely. And then the reflection spoke in a voice that was undeniably Emily's, but twisted and hollow, a voice filled with endless sorrow. "Lauren, come closer." Lauren's blood ran cold. Her pulse raced in her throat, choking her. She wanted to run, to scream, to tear herself away from the nightmare unfolding before her, but her feet were frozen. She couldn't move. Her body refused to listen. "Come to me, Lauren, you know you want to." Emily's voice echoed in the room, but it wasn't comforting. It was wrong. Dark. It made Lauren's stomach lurch. Suddenly, the air in the room shifted. The walls seemed to close in around her, the shadows growing longer, thicker. The temperature dropped again, plunging into an unbearable chill. The radio crackled and distorted, the sound of the warped song still playing softly in the background. "She's calling to you, Lauren," the night host whispered, his voice growing fainter, distant, as if he were fading into the very fabric of the station itself. "Do you remember the last time you saw her? The last time you heard her?" The question hit Lauren like a physical blow. Her mind spun, the memories flooding back, as if the mirror were not just reflecting her image, but peeling away layers of her past she had tried so desperately to forget. It was a summer day. Bright, sunny. Emily had been laughing, her arms wide, running across the backyard of their family home in Red Hollow. They'd been so young, so full of life, so alive. And then it all changed. The day the storm came, the sudden shift in the air, the warning of an incoming blizzard. The last time she had seen Emily standing on the porch waving goodbye, her figure swallowed up by the swirling snow, her heart squeezed painfully. She hadn't come back, and that was the last time Lauren had seen her. "Do you remember, Lauren?" The night host's voice lingered in her mind, coaxing. "You were supposed to protect her, but you failed, didn't you?" Lauren recoiled, her breath coming in shallow gasps. It felt like the air was growing thicker, her body heavier, as though the entire room was pressing in on her. The station, the mirror, the night host, all of it. The voices, the memories, the shadows. They were part of something older than time, something that could swallow her whole if she wasn't careful. "You think you're here to save her, don't you?" the night host continued. "But you can't. Not unless you understand. Not unless you see what's really happening here." She felt the pull again, a soft whisper in the back of her mind, "Come closer." Emily's voice, but it wasn't her sister. It was a thing wearing her face, using her voice to lure Lauren in. But Lauren couldn't look away. There was a part of her, some deep, buried part, that needed to understand. To know what had happened to her sister, what had really happened. Her legs moved of their own accord, drawn to the mirror. Her breath quickened as the glass seemed to shimmer, distorting the shadows within. The figures in the reflection shifted, warping into forms she couldn't quite understand. They were there, the shadows, the people lost to time, the ones who had come to the station and never left. Suddenly, a hand pressed against the glass, pale and trembling, just like the reflection of Emily. The fingers were thin, almost skeletal, the skin translucent, as though it had been peeled from a corpse. The reflection reached toward her, the fingers curling, grasping. It was her sister. No, it couldn't be. The cold that swept through the air intensified, a biting wind that seemed to crawl under her skin. Lauren felt herself being drawn toward the glass, as if something inside the mirror were pulling her in, beckoning her to step closer, to reach out. Her fingers trembled as she raised her hand to the surface. The reflection did the same, but it wasn't her hand. It was Emily's. No, something else's. A pale, distorted hand that had no place in the world of the living. Then, without warning, the reflection of Emily began to scream. No sound escaped her mouth, but Lauren could see the terror, the desperation in her eyes. The figure in the mirror was no longer her sister. It was something else, something old and twisted, its face now contorted in pain. The glass began to crack. The sound was deafening, as though the mirror itself was breaking under the weight of something ancient, something that had been waiting far too long. And then, the voice of the night host filled her mind, booming, overwhelming. Do you understand now, Lauren? He spoke, but his voice was everywhere, inside her head and her chest, rattling through her bones. It's all a part of the station. The past, the present. Everything gets caught here, trapped. And you've come to join it. Lauren took a step back, but the pull was too strong. The shadows in the reflection reached through the cracks in the glass, their hands stretching out, trying to grab her. She screamed, but the sound was lost in the static, swallowed by the room. Her vision blurred as she fought to tear herself away from the mirror, but it was as if the very air had become thick with some dark force. The reflection of Emily, no, not Emily, stared at her one last time, before it vanished into the cracks, leaving nothing but a shattered, empty glass, and then silence. For a moment there was only the faint hum of the static in the air. The world was still, until she heard it again. The voice. Lauren, you're not leaving. Not yet. The darkness closed in. Lauren stood there, her hand still trembling in the air where the mirror's reflection had been just seconds ago. The sound of the shattered glass echoing in her mind, her breath coming in shallow, frantic bursts. The room had fallen silent. Too silent, and for a brief, fleeting moment Lauren could have sworn the very air around her held its breath. She had expected something more, something louder, when the mirror cracked. A scream, a rush of sound, something to confirm that she wasn't alone in this nightmare. But the silence was absolute, and it terrified her more than anything. The shadows seemed to linger, crawling along the walls, like they had a life of their own, but they were still. Too still. The stillness was almost suffocating. Slowly, almost against her will, Lauren turned toward the night host. He hadn't moved. He stood there by the console, his back to her, his fingers lightly grazing the edge of the radio equipment. His expression hadn't changed. That same cold, unnatural smile that never reached his eyes. You think you've seen the worst of it, he said, his voice floating toward her like a wisp of smoke. But the mirror only shows what is already inside. You, Lauren, your fears, your regrets, your guilt. Lauren's stomach twisted as she stepped back, her thoughts racing. Guilt. The word reverberated in her mind. She had failed Emily. She had failed to protect her sister. She remembered how she had begged Emily to stay inside that night, how the storm had raged outside, the winds howling like banshees through the trees. Emily had insisted on going out, to meet her friends, to get away from the suffocating quiet of their house. And Lauren had watched her walk into the blizzard, her figure swallowed by the snow, just as their parents had told them not to. The search had been endless. Days spent combing through the forests, the icy trails, the freezing streets. But Emily had never come back. She's dead, Lauren thought, the realization sharp and painful. She's been dead for years. But the voice in her head, the voice of the night host, lingered. Was she? Why are you doing this? Lauren's voice cracked, raw with emotion. She stepped forward, her eyes now locked onto the man, the creature, who was the center of all this, the source of the nightmare, the one who had dragged her back into this forsaken station. She felt something heavy, like an iron weight, settle in her chest. It was the weight of realization, the weight of understanding. You're asking the wrong question, Lauren. The night host's voice was low, amused. You want to know why, but that's not what you need to understand. What you need to understand is that there's no escaping this. Not once you've stepped inside. Lauren's breath hitched. She reached for her phone, fumbling in her jacket pocket. desperate for any shred of connection to the outside world. The one thing she'd been holding on to, the one thing she thought could save her. She pulled the phone free, her hand shaking as she tried to unlock it. The screen flashed to life with a bright glow, but when she tried to open her messages, the phone screen blinked out. No service. The words danced across the screen in cold, final letters. The outside world is no longer a part of this. The night host's voice carried that strange, dark satisfaction. You're inside WZRP now, and once you step into this place, you're here forever. The station feeds on things like you, lost things that have nowhere else to go. Her legs buckled and she sank to her knees, her phone still clenched tightly in her hand. She wanted to scream. She wanted to shout, to rage against the impossible horror that was unfolding before her. But it was futile. She knew it was futile. You, see? The night host continued, his voice almost serene now. Emily never left. She was never really lost. She was always here in the station, the same as all the others, the ones who came before her, and once you're a part of this place, you never leave. Not really. Lauren's chest tightened. She fought the sob that was building in her throat. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. There had to be some explanation, some way to make sense of this nightmare, some way to fight back. But the shadows, the darkness, were already consuming her mind. They were wrapping themselves around her thoughts, pushing her toward the truth she didn't want to face. You never believed it, did you? The night host said, his voice a mockery, of kindness now. You thought she was gone, you thought it was just an accident, that there was nothing more to it. But there's always more. And Emily is just one of the many who've been kept in the station. Lauren shook her head violently. Her hands clenched into fists, her nails biting into her palms. No, she thought, I won't believe it, I won't. But the shadows kept whispering, they told her everything she had tried to forget. All of them, the lost, the broken, the ones who never returned, they're here. The night host's voice was a soft, cruel lullaby. And now, so are you. The walls seemed to press closer, the shadows creeping toward her like hungry hands. She could feel them wrapping around her, pulling her deeper into the station, into the never-ending darkness. Her breath became shallow, ragged. She tried to stand, tried to force herself to wake up, to run, to escape. But the shadows held her fast, pinning her down, suffocating her. And then, she heard it. The voice again. So faint, so far away, but unmistakable. Lauren. It was Emily, but not really Emily. The voice was weak, like a whisper on the wind. It echoed in her mind, making her heart race. Lauren. I'm sorry. The words felt like a hand gripping her heart. I'm still here, waiting. The shadows pressed harder now, twisting around her like chains. The mirror, broken and shattered, was alive with movement now. The reflection of Emily's twisted face staring back at her from the shards of glass. A broken, fractured image of the girl who was once her sister. The girl who had never left. And Lauren, lost in the cold, dark void of the station, understood. The past was never truly gone. It was always there, waiting to claim her. The shadows crawled closer, their tendrils wrapping around Lauren's limbs like cold, clammy fingers. The darkness pressed in from all sides, suffocating her, pulling at her skin, at her soul. She tried to fight, tried to break free, but the weight of the air around her was too heavy. She felt like she was drowning in it. The whispers, thick and layered with 1,000 voices, seeped into her mind. Every corner of her consciousness filled with them. They came in fragments, broken pieces of a memory, snatches of old conversations, echoes of the lives that had been swallowed by WZRP over the years. "Lauren." The voice came again, more urgent now. The whisper of her sister. It was raw, desperate. "Emily?" Lauren's heart surged, her mind reeling. But the voice was different. She couldn't tell if it was the real Emily, or the thing that had been wearing her face all this time. "I'm here, in the station, waiting." It was faint, but it cut through the static in her mind, making the world blur in a nauseating wave. "No, she's gone. She has to be gone." Lauren clawed at the floor, her fingers scraping against the cold concrete. The shadows tightened their grip. Her chest tightened with a violent pressure, like something heavy was slowly crushing her ribs. The air became colder, the temperature dropping so fast that her breath turned into a fog before her eyes. Then in the midst of the suffocating darkness, the light flickered. For a moment, the world seemed to shift. The radio station, the walls, the floor, the cracks. In the ceiling, they didn't feel real anymore. It was as if the entire building were nothing more than a mirage, a hollow shell. The past, the memories, everything was dissolving into something else, something ancient and wrong. A sudden sharp crack echoed through the room, like a bone breaking, and then the mirrors, the glass shards that had once reflected the twisted version of Emily, began to shift. The pieces rattled, their surfaces rippling as though something were moving beneath them, something alive. Not this again. Lauren recoiled, instinctively pushing herself backward into the corner of the room. Her chest heaved with panic, her thoughts a violent mess of confusion and fear. What was happening to her? To this place? She felt like the very fabric of reality was starting to unravel. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the dark shadows were starting to bleed into the corners of her vision, warping into grotesque shapes. The night host's voice broke through the static once more, his words dripping with a quiet malice. "You're beginning to see it now, aren't you?" Lauren looked up, her eyes wild, searching for him. She couldn't see him clearly, only the dark outline of his figure half swallowed by the shadows. "The station is a place of memories, Lauren. It feeds on them. It keeps them locked away." The night host's voice coiled through the air like smoke. "And now that you've crossed over, you're a part of it too. You're trapped in a loop. You'll never leave." She tried to stand, but her legs were like jelly. Her body was shaking uncontrollably, her mind overloaded with the madness that was unfolding around her. She could still hear Emily's voice, so faint, like it was coming from behind a wall or from the depths of the earth. "Lauren, please, you have to stop this, it's too late." The voice was close now, but it sounded so far away, so distorted, so broken. Lauren pressed her palms against her ears, trying to block it out, but the voice only grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't her sister. It wasn't Emily. It was something pretending to be Emily. "You're listening to the wrong voice," the night host crooned from the shadows, almost like a father speaking to a child. "You think she's calling you back, but she's just another lost soul. One of the many who've wandered into this place and never left." Lauren's heart thudded against her chest. Her mind screamed for her to leave, to get out of the station, to escape. But the shadows were everywhere now. The darkness swirled around her like a vortex, pulling her deeper into it. Every part of her body, every nerve, screamed at her to flee, but her feet were frozen. She couldn't move. "Please, Lauren," the voice of Emily whispered again. But now it was so faint, so distant that Lauren wasn't sure if she could trust it anymore. Suddenly, the room began to shift. The floor trembled and the air hummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like lungs. Lauren stumbled to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but something primal, told her that this wasn't just a nightmare, this was real. The night host chuckled from the shadows, his voice now distorted as though the very air itself was warping around him. The station is hungry, Lauren. It's been waiting for you just like it's waited for everyone else who's come here. And now that you've arrived, it won't let you go. Not until it's consumed you completely. Lauren's breath caught in her throat as she looked around, desperately searching for some way out. Her eyes darted to the radio equipment, the broken mirrors, the shadows that now seemed to have shape and form like creatures lurking in the dark. And then she saw it. A door. It was hidden in the far corner of the room, obscured by a pile of old equipment and debris. She hadn't noticed it before, but now it glowed faintly as though it were beckoning her. The door seemed like the only way out, the only escape. She couldn't explain it, but something about it felt right. She had to go through it. She staggered toward the door, her legs trembling, her body so weak that every step felt like it might be her last. The shadows reached for her, but she fought against them, pushing them away with all her strength. That handle was cold, almost impossibly cold as she gripped it with trembling fingers. She took one last look back at the night host, who still stood in the center of the room, his eyes gleaming with an unreadable intensity. "Don't bother," he said, his voice soft, almost regretful. "You can't escape the past, Lauren. Not from this place." With a surge of adrenaline, Lauren threw open the door. The world beyond it was a blur of light and darkness, but the feeling of being pulled through the threshold was almost instantaneous. The room, the station, the night host, the shattered mirrors, all vanished in an instant, swallowed up by the darkness behind the door. And then there was nothing. Lauren's heart hammered in her chest as she stumbled through the door, the cold air rushing past her like a tidal wave. The darkness swallowed her whole, pulling her deeper into its endless void. For a brief moment there was no sound, just the rush of her own pulse, her own breath. She felt like she was falling, sinking into the abyss, but her feet never touched the ground. It was as though the world itself had become liquid, shifting and reshaping around her, making it impossible to tell up from down. Then, just as quickly, as the dark had come, the world snapped back into focus. Lauren gasped, blinking against the harsh light that greeted her. The sudden brightness burned her eyes, and for a moment she couldn't make sense of what she was seeing. The air smelled fresh, clean, like rain after a long drought. There were trees in the distance, tall and thick, their branches heavy with leaves. The sound of wind rustling through them like a whisper. But something was wrong. There was something about this place that made her skin crawl. She was no longer in the station. In fact, she wasn't sure where she was at all. The landscape stretched out in front of her, an endless horizon of wild forests, winding rivers and jagged hills. But the air was still, unnaturally still. The kind of quiet that settles in when everything around you is watching, waiting. And there was something else, a sense that this place wasn't meant for her, that it wasn't meant for anyone. It was as though the very earth itself was wrong, like it had been twisted out of shape. Her chest tightened, and she took a cautious step forward. Her shoes crunched against the ground. Dirt, gravel, and something softer, like moss, clung to her soles. But there were no animals, no birds, no insects. Nothing moved. Her breath caught in her throat. Something felt terribly off, but the stillness felt almost familiar. She could feel it pressing against her, pulling at her mind, tugging her memories to the surface like an old photograph coming into focus. The blizzard, the station, Emily, The weight of it all crashed down on her like a wave. Her thoughts scattered in every direction. Her sister's face flickered behind her eyes. Emily, twisted and screaming, her reflection in the mirror shattered beyond recognition. The words of the night host echoed in her mind. The station feeds on memories, on the things that have nowhere else to go. And once you're inside, you never leave. Lauren's pulse quickened. Was this another part of the station? Another layer of the nightmare? Or was this something else entirely? She swallowed hard, forcing herself to move forward. The weight in her chest made it hard to breathe, but she had no choice. She couldn't stop. Not now. She had to find Emily. She had to. Her footsteps echoed in the stillness as she walked, the landscape stretching endlessly in front of her. The trees loomed tall and silent, their branches swaying as if they were watching her with 1,000 eyes. And then, just ahead, a figure appeared. Lauren froze, her blood running cold. It was a woman, a girl really, standing in the middle of the path. Her back was to Lauren and she was wearing a long white dress, the fabric fluttering in the wind. The girl's hair was dark, almost black, cascading down her back in loose waves. Emily? Lauren's heart skipped a beat. The girl turned slowly and Lauren's stomach twisted into a tight knot. It wasn't Emily. It was someone else. Someone who looked so much like her, but different. The face was pale, almost gaunt, and the eyes were dark, too dark, like black holes that stared right through her. The mouth twisted into a thin, cruel smile as if it knew something Lauren didn't. Lauren took a step back, a cold sweat prickling at the back of her neck. The girl didn't move. She just stood there, watching Lauren with those unblinking eyes, that unreal smile. "Who are you?" Lauren's voice trembled, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the girl. There was something hauntingly familiar about her, something wrong. The girl tilted her head, her smile widening. "I'm just another one who got lost." Her voice was soft, too soft, and for a moment, Lauren couldn't decide if she was speaking to her or to the wind itself. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. The girl's words seemed to echo in the stillness of the air, bouncing off the trees. It was almost as if the entire landscape was alive, listening. "Lost?" Lauren whispered, her mind reeling. She felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean? What is this place?" The girl's expression faltered for a fraction of a second, her eyes narrowing. Then, in the blink of an eye, she vanished, as though she'd never been there at all. Lauren's heart skipped and she stumbled forward, her pulse racing. She was dizzy, her thoughts spinning. The silence was overwhelming, the emptiness pressing in. She looked around, but the landscape hadn't changed. The trees still loomed, their gnarled branches hanging like dark fingers over the path ahead. But there was no sign of the girl. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. It's just another trick. Another illusion, Lauren thought, her head spinning. But when she turned back to face the direction she had been walking, she saw something else. A door. It was an ordinary wooden door standing alone in the middle of the vast emptiness. It was out of place, utterly absurd in the context of the landscape. No walls, no frame, just the door standing upright in the middle of nowhere. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached it, unsure of what to expect. But she couldn't stop herself. She was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle, but before she could grasp it, a voice, a familiar voice, whispered in her ear. "Don't open it." Lauren froze. It was Emily's voice. No, it couldn't be. But it was. Faint. Desperate. Pleading. She glanced over her shoulder, but no one was there. The trees were silent. The wind had stopped, and the door, The door was still there, but this time, Lauren couldn't ignore the sense of danger. She felt it deep in her gut. Something was wrong. But what choice did she have? Wasn't the door the way out? She grabbed the handle, twisted it, and the world collapsed. Lauren's fingers wrapped tightly around the door handle, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The sense of dread was suffocating, but there was no turning back now. The door had appeared out of nowhere, standing tall and unyielding in the middle of the barren landscape. She had to open it. She had to know what was on the other side. Her mind screamed at her to stop, to leave it closed, but her hand turned the handle anyway. It felt cold, colder than it should have been, and the air around her shifted as the door creaked open. The world seemed to tilt as she pushed the door forward, and when it finally gave way, the world broke. The landscape, the trees, the stillness, the eerie quiet vanished. The door swung open into nothingness, an endless black void that sucked at the light, swallowing everything in its path. It wasn't like stepping into another room. It was like stepping into the very fabric of nothing. Lauren's heart pounded in her chest, her entire body frozen in place. The void pulsed with a cold, unnatural energy that seemed to reach for her, calling her in. Then she heard it, a low hum, a vibration that began in the air around her and slowly began to creep into her chest, into her bones. The sound grew louder, a thrumming noise that seemed to warp the very air around her. She wanted to step back, to slam the door shut and run, but her legs felt like lead. She was trapped between the door and the dark void. No way forward, no way back. Suddenly, the hum shifted. A voice, a low, guttural growl, emerged from the darkness, its words indistinguishable but full of menace. Lauren, her name. The voice was unmistakable. It was her name, but it was wrong, twisted, distorted, like it came from something that didn't belong in the world. The darkness seemed to pulse with the sound of it. She stepped back, trying to distance herself from the door, but the void followed. It pressed against her, the weight of it suffocating. The air was thick, and she could barely breathe. Her mind spun as she tried to make sense of it all. "Emily," she whispered, her voice shaking. The voice came again, closer this time. "You shouldn't have opened the door." Lauren's pulse raced. The words felt alive, wrapping around her thoughts like a cold, venomous coil. Her fingers gripped the door frame tighter, but it was no use. She couldn't escape the feeling that something had already changed, that the moment she had touched that handle, everything had begun to unravel. A figure stepped out of the darkness. At first it was a shadow, nothing more than a silhouette in the overwhelming blackness. But as it moved closer, the figure became clearer, more defined. It was a woman, a girl really, dressed in tattered clothes, her hair wild and unkempt, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Lauren gasped. She knew this face. She'd seen it before, many times, in reflections, in dreams. Emily? Her voice cracked, filled with disbelief. The girl, no thing, stared back at her with hollow eyes, the eerie glow flickering like a dying flame. Her smile was slow, deliberate. "You should have listened," the figure rasped, her voice carrying that same unnatural distortion. Lauren recoiled, stumbling backward as the figure stepped closer, the ground beneath her feet softening as though the air itself had turned into liquid. The walls of reality seemed to bend, the boundaries between what was real and what was not blurring in ways that made Lauren's stomach twist. "What is this?" Lauren whispered, her voice barely audible, the weight of her dread crushing her throat. The girl, Emily, or the thing pretending to be Emily, took another step forward, her smile widening. "This is the station," she said, her voice dropping to a low, guttural growl. "You've crossed the threshold. You're part of it now." Lauren's heart stopped. The words didn't make sense. Part of it? The figure began to fade, her form shifting, in and out of reality like a wisp of smoke. The edges of her face began to distort, twisting unnaturally as her features melted into something else, something more grotesque. It wasn't Emily anymore. It was something that looked like her, but everything about it was wrong. The air around Lauren thickened, the temperature plummeting. She gasped for breath, her skin prickling with the cold that seeped into her bones. The darkness closed in, and the figure's voice grew louder, more insistent. "You can't leave." The words reverberated in her mind, echoing, consuming her thoughts. The darkness twisted, contorting into nightmarish shapes, faces, hands, limbs, all of them shifting and merging into a grotesque mass of writhing bodies. Her breath caught in her throat as her body refused to move. The figure, now something monstrous, reached out, its fingers long and spindly, clawing at the air as it tried to pull her toward the void. Its smile stretched impossibly wide, its eyes empty, consumed by darkness. The station never lets you go. Lauren could feel the pressure closing in. The walls, the air, the space itself seemed to be collapsing around her, as if the very fabric of the world was unraveling. But then, something changed. A sharp crack pierced the air, like a branch snapping in the wind. The darkness around her seemed to hesitate for just a second. The figure faltered, its grotesque form flickering like a broken television screen, and then a voice, a different voice, clearer, cut through the chaos. "Lauren, run!" She spun, her heart leaping into her throat. The voice wasn't distorted, it wasn't twisted, it was real. There, standing just beyond the door, was another figure, a man. His face was shadowed, but there was something familiar about him. His presence was like a beacon of light in the dark void. "Come on," he shouted, his voice urgent. "You have to get out of here now." Without thinking, without hesitation, Lauren ran toward him. Her body felt light, almost weightless, as though the very air was lifting her. The darkness shrieked behind her, clawing at her heels, but she didn't look back. The door slammed shut. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound of it echoing like the final toll of a bell, and the oppressive darkness that had swallowed her whole began to retreat. For a moment there was nothing but silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that seemed to wrap around her chest, making it hard to breathe. Lauren stood in the dimly lit room, her mind still reeling from what had just happened. The shadows were gone. The grotesque figure of Emily, or whatever it had been, had vanished. But the air was thick with tension, like something was waiting just beyond the edges of her perception. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. The man who had called to her stood before her, his back turned, his figure faintly illuminated by the soft, eerie light that seemed to hang in the air. His presence was familiar, but Lauren couldn't place it. It was as though he existed just on the edge of her memory, a name she couldn't quite remember, a face that seemed to flicker between recognition and confusion. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her legs unsteady as she took a cautious step forward. The man turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. There was a flash of recognition in his gaze, but it was quickly replaced with something more distant, as if he was seeing her through a fog. His features were sharp, but his face was worn, like someone who had been through too much, seen too much. His clothes were tattered, as though he had been wandering through this strange, shifting world for longer than he could remember. "I'm someone who has been where you are," he said, his voice gravelly, filled with an exhaustion that seemed to seep into his every word. "But I'm not here to explain." Lauren frowned, stepping closer, her body tense with uncertainty. The room around her flickered like a malfunctioning light bulb, shifting from one place to another in rapid succession. One moment it was a cold, sterile space, the next a decaying hallway with peeling wallpaper. Then it became a dark forest, the trees swaying in the wind as if they were alive, breathing. "What is this place?" she demanded, her voice cracking, as the chaos around her seemed to warp the very fabric of reality. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past her, his gaze distant. For a moment, Lauren thought he was looking at something far beyond her, something in the shadows, something she couldn't see. "It's a reflection," he said at last, his voice soft but steady. "A reflection of the station, of everything that's happened here, everything that has happened to you." Lauren's heart skipped a beat. The station, the night host, the mirrors, Emily. She could feel the weight of the memories pressing against her, threatening to break free, but the man's words kept her rooted in place. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping closer, almost desperate for answers. "How do you know about the station?" "About me?" The man's eyes flickered, a flicker of pain flashing across his face. He opened his mouth and closed it again, like he was trying to say something but couldn't. "I don't have time to explain it all," he said quickly. "But listen to me. You need to understand something." Lauren felt the tension in the air grow thicker, and the walls of the room began to bend once more, warping as though reality itself was breaking down. The room seemed to ripple like water, and the man took a step toward her, his hand outstretched. "The station is more than just a place," he continued, his voice now urgent. "It's a trap. It feeds off the past, the lost memories, the broken pieces of those who come into it. It doesn't just keep them, it consumes them. That's what it wants. And it's already too late for me." Lauren's mind raced. The darkness, the shadows, the mirrors, the night host. It was all starting to make sense in a twisted, horrific way. The man's words echoed in her mind like a warning. She could feel the weight of them pressing against her chest. "But you," she started to say, but he cut her off. "I tried to leave," he said bitterly. "I tried, but it doesn't work that way. The station, this place, it keeps you here no matter what. Once you're inside, you're part of it, and you'll never get out." Lauren's blood ran cold at his words. She had felt the pull, the suffocating weight of the darkness. She had seen what happened to those who got too close. Emily. Her sister's face flashed before her eyes, and she could feel the anguish that had been tearing at her chest. Was Emily still out there somewhere? Was she lost in the same nightmare? Or had she already become part of the station? Lauren took a step back, shaking her head. "There has to be a way out," she whispered almost to herself. "There has to be a way to escape." The man's face softened for a brief moment, like he wanted to reach out to comfort her, but the sadness in his eyes only deepened. "There is no escape," he said, his voice a low, pained whisper. "Not unless you understand that the station isn't just a place. It's a part of you. It feeds off your fear, your pain, your memories. And the more you try to fight it, the more it consumes you. The longer you stay, the more it takes from you. It will twist your mind, change your very perception of reality until you don't even know who you are anymore." Lauren felt a chill run down her spine. She could feel the weight of his words sinking into her, deeper and deeper. It was like they were clawing at her, tearing her apart from the inside. She had already lost so much. Emily, her sense of reality herself. Could she survive this? Could she escape before the station consumed her completely? But before she could say anything more, a loud, shrill noise echoed through the room. The sound of static, distorted and unearthly, like a broken radio trying to tune into a signal. The man's face went pale. He glanced around nervously, his eyes widening in fear. "It's here," he whispered. "We're running out of time." Before Lauren could react, the walls of the room began to warp again, twisting and bending like rubber. The air became thick and suffocating, and the man stepped back, his hand reaching for her one last time. "You have to choose," he said, his voice now a frantic whisper. "Run, or face the station. It's your only chance." And then, the world shattered. The world splintered around her. The floor vanished beneath her feet, and the room, if it had ever really been a room at all, disappeared into the swirling void, its walls breaking apart like shards of glass. Time itself fractured, stretching and compressing in erratic pulses as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. Lauren couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Her mind screamed for her to move, to do something, anything. But the air was thick, suffocating. The static noise, the same garbled, broken sound, ripped through the void, vibrating the very air around her. It was louder now, closer, as if the station itself was coming alive, crawling into her bones, twisting her thoughts. The man, the one who had warned her, was gone. His face, his voice, everything had faded into the chaos. The void had swallowed him whole, just like it had done to so many others, just like it had done to Emily. And yet, amidst the swirling darkness, a single thought remained. The door. She could feel its presence, a faint glimmer of light in the ever-growing shadow. It was still there, somewhere in the distance, just beyond her reach. But it was her only chance, wasn't it? The man had said she had to choose. Run or face the station. But what did that mean? Could she really escape this place? Or was it already too late for her too? A flash of memory pierced through the darkness. Her sister's face. Emily, distorted, twisted, screaming. She had seen her. She had touched her reflection in the mirror, but Emily had been wrong. Her face had been shattered, her voice distorted. She had become a part of the station. Would Lauren be next? No. She wouldn't allow it. She couldn't. She refused to. Let this thing, this nightmare, claim her as it had claimed so many others. She wasn't ready to let go, not yet. Her legs shook beneath her, her knees buckling as she tried to steady herself. The static was overwhelming now, the air pulsing with a feverish intensity, but still, that faint glow of light, the door, called to her. Lauren's eyes burned, her head throbbing as if it was going to explode. The urge to run, to escape, overwhelmed her. She had to go. She had to reach the door. With all the strength she could muster, she pushed herself forward, stumbling, her feet dragging as if the very earth was pulling her back. She couldn't stop herself. She couldn't turn away. The darkness, the void, was closing in, but the door was still there, still waiting. She ran. Every step felt like it took everything from her. The static in the air intensified, becoming a physical force, pressing down on her chest like a heavy weight. The space around her warped, flickering like an old film reel. The world contorting in and out of focus, but she kept moving. She had to keep moving. The door grew closer, its faint light cutting through the black like a beacon. It was the only thing that felt real, the only thing that made sense in the madness. She reached for it with shaking hands, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the doorframe. And then, just as her fingers closed around the handle, the world paused. For a single breath, everything stood still, the air, the darkness, the hum of the station. And then the voice. It's too late. The voice wasn't distorted anymore. It wasn't broken. It was Emily's voice. Clear. Real. And yet, it was laced with an unmistakable sadness, as though her sister's spirit was trapped somewhere in the folds of this nightmare. Lauren froze, her hand still on the door handle, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't want to turn around, didn't want to face what was behind her, but the voice, the pain, it gnawed at her. She had to know. With trembling hands, Lauren slowly turned, and there, in the midst of the void, stood Emily. Or something that looked like her. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and empty, her hair tangled like it had been dragged through the dark for years. Her form was insubstantial, flickering in and out of focus, as though she were caught between two realities. Emily. Lauren's voice broke as she whispered her sister's name. The figure of Emily smiled, but it was an empty, hollow smile, one that sent a shiver of terror through Lauren's spine. "I'm here," Emily's voice whispered, but it was like a distant echo. "But I'm not the one you remember. I've been lost, just like you will be." The words hit Lauren like a punch to the gut. She gasped for air, her vision blurring. The pain, the guilt, flooded through her. She had come so far, fought so hard to save her sister. But now, looking at Emily's distorted form, she realized something she hadn't wanted to admit. There was no saving her. Emily had become part of the station just like everyone else. The station consumed those who stayed too long. It twisted their memories, their identities, until they were no longer who they had been. And there was no escape from it. No way to break free. Tears welled in Lauren's eyes, but she didn't look away. This wasn't Emily anymore. It couldn't be. And yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the girl in front of her was the last trace of the sister she had known. The last piece of the past that was slipping away. "I'm sorry," Lauren whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the station. For a moment, Emily's face flickered, just for a second, like a brief crack in the illusion. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. The figure dissolved into the darkness, leaving Lauren standing alone, her fingers still gripping the door handle. She didn't look back. With one final trembling breath, Lauren opened the door and stepped through. The door slammed shut. The air was still. The world was quiet, and for the first time since she had stepped into the station, Lauren felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. She was free. But as the silence settled around her, a single question lingered in her mind, a question that had no answer. Was she really free? As Lauren stepped away from the door, the world around her began to unravel again, the memories of her sister haunting her every step. She could feel the weight of everything she had lost, but also the spark of something, hope, flickering deep within. Her journey was far from over. She didn't know if she could truly escape the station, or if the darkness had already claimed her forever. But one thing was certain: she couldn't stop fighting. Not for herself, and certainly not for Emily. Now, it's your turn. Will you continue to run, or will you face the station? The choice is yours. Will you unravel the truth that lies hidden in the shadows, or let the darkness consume you like it did so many before? The door is waiting, but this time, it's not just the story, it's your journey.